From virtually the first day that pictures began to move, movie-making pioneers have been exploring ways to thrill film audiences. Stunts and special effects were being attempted by actors, producers, and cameramen even before anybody knew what to call them. Dedicated actors thought nothing of becoming daredevil acrobats if their movies and their audiences demanded it. In fact, the inscrutable basset-hound face of silent star Buster Keaton, which tickled the funny bone of movie fans for half a century, was probably designed to keep audiences from learning about all of the immortal comedian's aches and pains. Keaton, seen here in his classic film Cops, liked to think that preparing his stunts in advance made them safer. Still, in 1920, he fell from the second floor of a building, injuring both elbows in his back, and in a water tower stunt, Keaton was thrown backward onto a metal rail and broke his neck. Fortunately for movie audiences, he lived on to entertain them in film for another half a century. And female stars didn't have it any easier. Pearl White, seen here hanging from a laundry line in The Fatal Ring from her famous Perils of Pauline series, suffered a serious back injury in one of the episodes of the series, while Helen Gibson was risking life and limb hanging from a water tower in the 1914 cliffhanger, The Hazards of Helen. Ruth Rowland certainly didn't have the luxury of a stunt double when she leaped onto a moving train and did a little fighting, and then hitched a ride on a passing airplane. And don't think these women were overpaid for their efforts. Would you believe $50 a week? There were many others. Comedians like Billy Bevan, seen here in his comic thriller Lilies of the Field, Monty Banks in Play Safe, and Larry Seaman in the hilarious Kid Speed. And while these pioneer entertainers left us a treasury of early movie magic, today's stuntmen and women find themselves trying to live down the daredevil reputations of the early movie pioneers.
We are not daredevils. A daredevil will get into a car or go into a fire and say, go for it, just do it. A stuntman or stuntwoman will take every consideration possible. I will do everything that I can to ensure safety. And I will not roll those cameras or do the stunt until I've done I've taken every consideration I could for that stunt.
If there's one stunt that has always been the meat and potatoes of action movie making, it has to be the fight scene. Nothing fancy, but if it's done right, it can be very exciting. In the early films, they made no bones about it. The fight scenes were the real thing. The guys really hit each other, they cracked real chairs over real heads, and crashed through real glass windows. And they had the bumps and bruises to show for it, until John Wayne came along and began to sell a punch without making contact. But in the 1980s, the John Wayne style of fighting has gone the way of the horse and buggy. A new kind of fighting has taken its place, which emphasizes style, finesse, and the agility of a gymnast. Movies featuring the rapid-fire kicking and punching of former karate champion Chuck Norris have broken box office records.
The 80s, that's what people do. You know, they don't fight like John Wayne did in the 50s. That's the obsolete method. And so if I fought like that, they say, well, gee, you know, he doesn't even know how to fight. So I have to use the more modern version of fighting on the screen, which is the martial arts.
And no Chuck Norris film is complete without a hair-raising display of Norris's fighting prowess. Soon-Tek Oh, who plays Chuck Norris's ruthless adversary Colonel Yin in Missing in Action: The Beginning, has 20 years' experience in the martial arts. Still, he must know exactly where Norris's kicks and punches are going to land. One small mistake, and there could be a serious injury.
When you do a fight scene, it's not only the giving, it's the receiving. If the guy doesn't react properly, no matter how good you punch or kick, it's not going to look good unless the guy reacts properly to it. And so it's a give-and-take situation when you do fights.
There's only one martial arts sequence in Missing in Action: The Beginning, and it comes at the end. After 10 films, Chuck Norris knows the importance of the final fight scene.
I think it's going to turn out to be a very, very good fight scene at the end. It has to be, because it's the climatic ending, and I have to pay back all the things that he has done to all of us. If I don't pay him back, then you lose the film.
A Chuck Norris fight scene owes more to the quick-stepping talents of a Fred Astaire than it does to the old movie brawls in a Western saloon. Norris always reviews his fighting choreography with his stunt coordinators, who play as important a role in a Chuck Norris film as anyone in the cast and crew. Here, John Barrett, standing in for Soon Tech, poises himself like an Olympic gymnast. He will leap backward as Norris strikes a blow.
Yeah, I'm going up.
Ready?
Barrett also doubles for Soon Tech in the difficult acrobatic segments of the fight sequence. In this scene from Missing in Action, see if you can tell when Soon Tech is doing his own fighting and when Barrett replaces him.
Not yet.
While fight scenes have been around since the early silent films, fire stunts and effects have become a trademark of movies of the 70s and 80s. We've come to associate fire with science fiction in movies like Terminator, where stuntman Frank Asadi makes a fiery leap onto the hood of a moving car. And Life Force, as two of Britain's finest stuntmen risk their lives in a two-man burn. And the fire scenes are just as powerful in Exterminator 2, which features one of the most thrilling and dangerous stunts in motion pictures, the full-body burn. On the New York set of the film, a record 5 men are being burned in a single scene. Countless hours of preparation and rehearsals are supervised by stunt coordinator Ted Duncan, who must not only observe traditional safety precautions, but must carefully plan how the 5 men can move freely and dramatically without endangering one another. Director Mark Buntsman has tremendous respect for what Ted Duncan brings to his film.
He knows how to draw that very fine line between really being safe and protecting the stuntmen and the other people on the set, and also putting the shot together in a way that really sells it dramatically.
There is no margin for error. One mistake or one miscue could be fatal. New York firemen and paramedics are standing by, just in case something goes wrong. And there is one final concern which Ted Duncan must leave to his stuntmen.
The main thing is, while you're breathing, you're got to hold your breath, get into the wind, and take your breath and then let it out while the fire is blowing away from you. If you turn and it whips around in front of you and you get a face full of fire, then you got it in your lungs and it sears the lungs.
Before the burn begins, the automatic weapons are checked to make sure that they are firing properly. The effects crew then covers the stuntmen with a flammable material similar to rubber cement, which will burn itself but not the clothing underneath. Each stuntman wears fire-retardant underclothes. Any portion of their bodies left exposed to the flame is completely covered with a non-flammable gelatin. Ted Duncan gives the cue to light the bodies, and just like an ensemble of actors, the movements of the stuntmen have been carefully orchestrated, and they slowly drift toward their predetermined positions where the flames are extinguished. Let's now look at how the scene plays in the final version of Exterminator 2. In 1914, when Cecil B. DeMille was faced with blowing up a wagon train for his film, The Warrens of Virginia, he realized that the only way to create the illusion was to actually blow up the wagons. So he protected his drivers with sheets of iron and independent wheels that allowed the front part of the wagon to break away clean. Still, he couldn't avoid having two men lose their hands working with unexploded bombs. On the set of Missing in Action: The Beginning, massive explosions have been engineered by effects wizard Dick Parker, whose credits include such epics as Patton, The Battle of the Bulge, and The Ten Commandments. 7 decades of motion picture history have taught veterans like Dick Parker to be fanatics about safety.
Anytime you work with explosives, it's possible to die. If you make a mistake, if you break the rules, let's say, it's very possible to kill yourself. And we, unfortunately, have had a lot of our effects people over the years being killed by making mistakes. So I have a very set of rules that I follow. And if somebody breaks the rules, I'm very willing to throw them right off of the set, even if it would be the best man I have.
For the first explosion in the film, the effects crew sets dynamite charges which will send a blazing fire through the headquarters of the North Vietnamese Colonel Yin. The object is for the interior of the structure to be charred, but not destroyed. One mistake and the building will be demolished, and weeks of shooting would be lost.
Speed! Speed!
The crew is right on the spot to douse the flames with water before they can do more damage to the set than is required. For the final explosion of the film, enough dynamite will be used to send a shudder through the entire island.
What we need is something that's very effective as far as look. So this explosion, in place of being one thing, will be a composite of maybe 15 or 18 separate explosions, but they'll be done where they're practically together, but a fraction of a second apart. And if you did the whole thing in one explosion, you'd have to go down to the bottom of the canyon because it would be so hard that somebody would get hurt.
Multiple cameras are used to capture the explosion. A remote high-speed camera is hidden in the camouflage and protected from flying debris. A second camera is mounted on a tower high above the camp. And a third is rigged in the helicopter, which will provide an aerial view. The additional camera angles will cause the explosion to appear more powerful to the audience. Director Lance Houle reviews his preparations with Director of Photography, Jorge Stahl.
When Braddock comes right to us, when he's there, he says, "You lose," the explosion goes off, and he walks out of frame, and then the helicopter goes up, shooting the thing as if it were his point of view from the helicopter.
Dynamite is planted throughout the bamboo foundation of Colonel Yin's headquarters. Dick Parker's explosives specialists work right alongside local laborers. Primer cord is rigged, and holes are drilled for the dynamite. The mood is casual, yet extremely careful.
This is dynamite here, and the primer cord, just running our leads for our primer. And it should make a hell of an explosion.
To capture the impact of the blast, our camera is positioned only 75 feet away. Now watch the explosion very carefully and observe how the multiple cameras enhance the look and feeling of the blast in the final version of the film. When it's all over, the cast and crew are relieved that the explosions have been captured on film and no one has been hurt. Dick Parker's operation has indeed been a success.
Yeah, man.
What is it you carry in that satchel, anyway?
Huh?
What is it you keep?
A little tiny A-bomb.
Thermo nuke.
On the set of Invasion USA, stunt coordinator Aaron Norris is supervising an explosion that will rock a quiet Atlanta neighborhood. But Norris is faced not only with the problem of blowing up the house, the script calls for people to be caught in the blast as well.
You don't know what's going to take place when you're dealing with an explosion of this size. This explosion could easily reach this truck. And if
if it does the concussion and the blast and the fireball, and including the debris that will be falling, could injure your actors.
For the scene, Norris has enlisted the help of 6 stuntmen and women who will have to remain dangerously close to the exploding house. The roof will be blasted off, a gigantic alcohol fireball will soar through the opening, and chunks of wooden 2x4s will rain down around them.
The stunt personnel have the mind and the reflexive action to react to a situation if it should happen to go wrong, and they will cover themselves, and they will not panic.
As the countdown begins, the camera is hidden behind a protective housing and the stunt people are carefully arranged. Notice, particularly, stuntman Don Pike, who sits in the car, dangerously close to the explosion. An explosion like this one sends adrenaline rushing even through the veins of seasoned veterans like Aaron Norris and his crew who have done it many times.
That was a nice explosion.
Don, what happened to
Tell them how you enjoyed that explosion.
That was really rough, I'll tell you. I was so nervous. They said 20 seconds for, the rehearsal, but it wasn't 20 seconds.
Okay? That was great. Did a good job.
Now let's have a look at Russians shooting up a quiet Atlanta neighborhood in the actual film of Invasion USA. In the silent screen heyday of Lon Chaney, when he had to play characters like Dr. Wu, Quasimodo, the Hunchback of Notre Dame, cigar holders were used to broaden his nose and strips of fish skin were pulled around the back of his head to slant his eyes. In today's motion pictures, the responsibilities of makeup artists have broadened considerably. They not only change the appearance of the faces, they create parts of the body that move. They may attach them to people, they may let them run loose and attack some unwitting victim. For his $23 million science fiction epic, Life Force, the story of vampires from outer space who transformed London into a mass of walking corpses, director Toby Hooper chose British makeup effects artist Nick Maley to create the look and feeling of the walking shriveled, the ghostly creatures who haunt the city searching for fresh infusions of life energy.
Really, makeup effects is the coming together of animatronics and prosthetics. Prosthetics are an addition to human beings. Now that might be building a suit that goes on somebody or just building a false nose that goes on. Really, to be a prosthetic, it needs to fit onto a person. Animatronics are things which are biological to look at, artistically look biological, but in fact mechanically created. Makeup effects or special makeup is a mixture of both of those things, combining the puppets with the makeup and combining, say, a prosthetic makeup with a puppet with something else to create an overall illusion.
On Life Force, Nick Maley and his crew are responsible for applying makeup to hundreds of shriveled extras who director Toby Hooper sends rampaging across the back lot of London's Elstree Studios. But that massive job is just for starters. For scenes involving the discovery of 3 vampires from space, Maley had to create full body casts for each actor, including the space girl, played by French newcomer Mathilda May. Here, actor Aubrey Morris, who plays Britain's Home Secretary in the film, must sit through the arduous process of creating a plaster life mold of his face. It begins with the pasting of liquid latex. Maylee's staff must work quickly because the latex dries very fast. When Morris's face is completely covered by the latex gelatin, a layer of plaster is then added so that the latex underneath can be supported. Finally, the finishing touches are completed and the plaster cast is removed in 2 pieces, so both the impression of the face and the back of the head can be made in the quick-drying latex.
Did you get the result? Yes. Lovely. Yes, excellent.
The final step in the 2-hour process is the completion of the plaster cast, and there is a striking resemblance to the face of actor Aubrey Morris. But the resemblance is even more uncanny when the incredible lifelike bust is completed. Here is the blood-curdling scene in which Aubrey Morris' bust is utilized. One of Nick Maylee's most striking creations is a fully articulated mechanical arm. The arm, which took 240 hours to construct, not only resembles a human limb, it operates like one as well. It has the same number of bones and joints as its human counterpart. The arm is radio-controlled by a device which closely resembles a human hand and wrist. The finger and wrist movements of the operator will be exactly duplicated by the mechanical device. Before the shooting begins, director Toby Hooper discusses the scene with Nick Maylee.
I'm just going to have a thing wiping the frame, just blast right through it and get him. Then he'll react and drive off, and then it'll be a cut, and I'll be back inside with him fighting this thing.
For the filming of the sequence involving the mechanical arm, the first step is to photograph the shriveled stuntman plunging his fist through a pane of breakaway glass as he begins to strangle Life Force star Steve Railsback. Then the mechanical arm is fit into place with 2 additional preparations. First, the stuntman's arm is taped very tightly to his body so it will not appear to be hidden beneath his shirt, and a blood pump is rigged to spurt blood when the arm is yanked out of its socket. Finally, the stuntman is strategically placed with his arm wedged into the window of the vehicle, and he begins to go after his victim, Steve Railsback. Probably Nick Maylee's most exciting creation has been saved for the difficult transformation sequence, as he brings to life a cadaver on an examining table with the assistance of 23 puppeteers who carefully listen to his instructions by radio. For the scene, 2 completely articulated puppets are required. Actor Jerome Willis will be used at the beginning of the transformation and will be replaced by one of the puppets, a replica of himself, in the middle of the scene. For each of the first stages of the transformation, Nick Maylee must carefully apply makeup to Willis. His face will be photographed in extreme close-up, and the camera must capture crucial moments in the terrifying exchange of energy. A stunning resemblance between Willis and his puppet double is critical. Look at the 2 of them together. It's almost impossible to tell them apart. And every detail of the actor's makeup must be duplicated on the puppet double. The transformation is actually a collaboration between Maylee and visual effects specialist John Dykstra, whose crew at the Apogee Studios in Los Angeles creates the look of the sizzling exchange of energy with the use of lasers and computer-controlled cameras. Now let's have a look at how the transformation sequence appears in Life Force. Nick Maley is not only a highly skilled creator of these lifelike creatures, he is also prepared to destroy them with explosives when the script demands it.
This material that you can see here is cortex. It looks rather like a wick of a candle, but in fact it's an explosive. And that will totally disintegrate this body.
The kind of work Nick Maley is doing with dummies and life force has been a part of even the earliest films. Dummies have saved actors a lot of aches and pains over the years. By the 1980s, director Tobe Hooper has dummies and live actors working right alongside one another.
Want to demonstrate this? Show me what you're going to do? Great. Good. Fine. Thanks.
And even the director has trouble telling the dummies from the real thing.
How many live people are here? 2? Okay, good.
After nearly a century of movie making, the audiences have become much more sophisticated. However, the problems facing a director are still the same. How to make it look real. In the 1950s, dozens of films appeared on movie screens across the country featuring terrifying monsters and strange creatures from other planets. Japanese producers turned Godzilla loose on the movie audiences around the world, and the film Them quickly followed in Godzilla's oversized footsteps. In America, films like Terror from Beyond Space and 20 Million Miles from Earth brought to life strange worlds of the future. The hit film Terminator, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, the story of a cyborg, part man, part machine, who returns to the present to prevent the future, is certainly a chip off the old block of science fiction films of the 50s. The Terminator highlights the work of Emmy Award-winning effects maestro Stan Winston, who devised some highly unique makeup and special effects for the film based on sketches given to him by director James Cameron.
Creator of Terminator effects, basically, is the title. My involvement is that I've basically the head of a large and extremely talented crew that have built and sculpted and put together this initial concept of gyms.
I never thought the time will come where I will be looking at photographs and I myself would ask myself, is this me or is this the dummy? There was no way of telling the difference. And it was really weird. And only out of 10 times when I was asked the question, I must have been wrong 6 or 7 times.
There is, however, a distinct difference in the appearance of the Terminator when he ceases to hide behind human flesh. He becomes the 200-pound, electronically controlled robot created in the mind of Terminator director James Cameron and built and designed by Stan Winston. The robot stands 6 feet 2 inches tall and has over 1,000 chrome-plated moving parts that were handcrafted by Stan and his staff. Building the mechanical marvel took almost a year from the original idea and initial drawings. Stan and his crew prepare for a scene where the cyborg has been injured in a fiery explosion. This will be the first time the Terminator robot has been tested and filmed in a scene. Everything must work according to plan. Stan and his crew must simulate for the cameras that the robot is walking with a limp. It will take a crew of 5 men to operate the robot, all moving in tandem to create the illusion for the cameras.
That's what we have to do.
The robot presented a new acting challenge for Terminator star Linda Hamilton.
Working with the robot was a real experience, and it was very fascinating, and I just must applaud everything that they did. You know, they worked as hard as I did. It was also very strange because you have lots of people operating a puppet, and the director, I mean, it's not a real reality per se that you can just look at and respond to. You have to create it for yourself and then respond to it. And instead, you've got a director saying, okay, here he is. Okay, now he's getting up, and now he's going around, and now he's coming. You know, you have a little hand to work with too often. But it was very interesting. Certainly, you know, one of the nicer things about the film.
Terminator, I must say, out of my career of a short 15 years, is the most exciting project that I've been involved with, and I hope will be extremely successful. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for everyone to see, and I was extremely fortunate in that I had such an amazingly talented group of guys to work with, whose names will remain off the screen, and no one will ever know who they are, because I'm taking all the credit.
Now let's take a look at a scene from the final version of The Terminator. Sometimes special effects are very subtle. So subtle, in fact, that an audience may not be aware there's an effect going on at all. In Electric Boogaloo, Breakin' 2, breakdance star Boogaloo Shrimp appears to be dancing on the ceiling, something film fans haven't seen since Fred Astaire did the trick more than 30 years ago in his movie Royal Wedding. For the effect, production designer Joe Garrity had to create a rotating room which doubled for the stationary set his crew had built for the other scenes in the film. Numerous problems had to be solved. The set had to be stabilized with counterweight so that it would turn smoothly. The walls, floor, and ceiling had to be sturdy enough to stand the turning, and everything on the set had to be pinned down. Even Boogaloo's girlfriend must have her hair start so it doesn't flop in the wrong direction when the laws of gravity are defied. The rotating room had to be turned manually by a crew of 3. It was difficult at first for Joe Garrity and his crew who had never tried this effect before. But when cameraman Jacques Haitkin was strapped in and turned upside down to shoot the scene, it worked very effectively. Let's look at the scene from Electric Boogaloo as Boogaloo Shrimp dances with his imaginary lover. Sometimes the star of a film is able to do his own stunts and get a kick out of the opportunity. In his romantic comedy, Secret Admirer, C. Thomas Howell did all of his own running, exhausting himself as he chases the girl he loves. And he also did some of his own driving. Howell figured he could do it. After all, the stunt coordinator on Secret Admirer is his father, Chris. And Howell began his career in the movies at the ripe old age of 8, doing stunts. Still, this is no guarantee that the sports car stunt will go without a hitch. But in Secret Admirer, C. Thomas Howell's running and driving are flawless, and he's obviously now got a much better chance to get the girl. The guys who photographed the movies in the early days were no less ambitious when it came to creating a special effect than the actors, stuntmen, and makeup artists they work with. In Larry Seaman's 1927 comedy, The Stuntman, the miniature cars and buildings were so effective that they still seem real to action fans 60 years later. Mirrors were often used to combine live film action with models or paintings, as in the 1927 German film classic, Metropolis. In the 1980s, a script may call for the destruction of a major city, London, for example, as was the case with the script for Life Force, the science fiction epic about vampires from outer space whose powerful lightning bolt creates blazing fires all over London. For the mammoth job of destroying one of the world's major cities, director Tobe Hooper called on visual effects specialist John Dykstra, who had previously masterminded the thrilling images of fantasy worlds in the films like Star Trek, Dune, and the hit television series Battlestar Galactica.
What we're setting out to do in this scene is to burn London, which is very difficult to do when you consider that London has a lot of people who would be very upset if you burned it around them. So what we're doing is burning a miniature of London, which is outside London by about 2.5 hours.
To create the illusion of the burning of London, Dykstra's crew set up their miniature city in an amusement park called Tuctonia. Tuctonia is well known for its full-scale model of London, so the effects crew brought with them only the miniatures they needed to destroy.
We've got them to agree to allow us to put fires and so forth in their miniatures, and we're burning it. We'll be putting that together with mats of real people running in the foreground, screaming and yelling and being destroyed by the vampires from space.
2.5 hours away in London, director Tobe Hooper is directing the live action for the destruction of London on the back lot of the L Street Studios. The mat process involves shooting hundreds of extras running in front of the Blue Max, the Academy Award-winning front projection screen created by John Dykstra and his Apogee Effects studio. This rough footage shows the blue screen area behind the running figures. Here are the miniatures shot at Tuctonia. In the final version of the film, Dykstra's miniatures are combined with the live-action footage. As you can see, the effect is incredibly believable. From the first moment director Edwin S. Porter photographed gun-blazing cowboys for the Great Train Robbery in 1903, movie makers have been hard at work trying to make gunfights as dramatic and realistic as they possibly could. One of the most exciting innovations came in the 1960s in films like The Wild Bunch and Bonnie and Clyde, which gave movie audiences some of the most unforgettable gunfights in cinema history. The bullet hits which stunned viewers in those pictures were produced by squibs, tiny charges which were electronically detonated. On the set of the murder thriller, The Naked Face, a squib explodes just in the nick of time to save star Roger Moore from a brutal beating. In the film, actor Ron Parody and Martin Grace, the stuntman who was doubled for Roger Moore in all of his James Bond films, worked closely on the timing of the gunshot under the watchful eye of director Brian Forbes. On The Naked Face, one thing is very different, however. Roger Moore plays a guy who isn't much of a fighter.
I don't normally get beaten up. As I said before, I play heroes, and I always win because I read the script. I know I'm going to win. But in this one, I take a brutal beating, and I never really get to do anything back, which is rather sad. I shall make up for it when the filming's over.
So when I give you the gunshot, you know, you want the gunshot when it's up, when it's there. Okay, I'll give it to you then.
Director Brian Forbes is choreographing a gunshot utilizing a squib in tandem with a 50-foot fall from a factory platform. Timing is everything. To get just the right look for the cameras, Forbes rehearses very carefully with the stuntman who is standing in for Ron Parody.
Mine goes off, okay? Action. You want it on the upright, do you want it? Act it a bit more then, right? You're going to hit him. Okay, go. Got it?
And here's the scene as it plays in the actual film.
What isn't disposable is the life I've made.
Here, pyrotechnician Greg Landerer is creating blood bags, which will be attached to the squib.
Put the corner of the bag where the impact is supposed to be, so once the blood is blown out, gravity feed forces it out of the hole after you shoot.
Landerer places a piece of foam between the squib and the actor's body to protect the actor from feeling the sting of the squib. He detonates it with a 9-volt battery.
Never give an actor the button, because what he'll do is he will anticipate the action of the gun hit. He'll go to fire and you'll get this. So it's done away from him. He doesn't know when it's coming. It's more real.
Even though Harold Lloyd did actually hang from the sides of tall buildings for many of his pictures, he later admitted that he used wires in many of these stunts because authorities insisted on it. Today, wires are used for scenes involving flying or weightlessness. The exploration aboard the alien spaceship in Life Force involved shooting a quartet of weightless floating astronauts and presented a difficult challenge for director Toby Hooper and his crew on location at London's Elstree Studios.
It was just very time-consuming to get to shoot many, many takes to get the floating proper, to get the speed of it proper, and to get everything happening at the right time.
The astronauts and star, Steve Railsback, are outfitted with jetpacks designed to the same specifications used by NASA. But there the resemblance ends. The astronauts are pulled on steel piano wire, which is used because of its great tensile strength. And they are carefully fit into a fiberglass hip harness because the hip is the center of gravity of the human body. They're moved with ropes and pulleys, while a remote control device activates the jetpacks. Still, the effectiveness of the wire work depends in large measure on the performances of the actors, because they actually are just hanging there like a sack of wheat. They have to give the impression of grace and balance, and speaking from experience, it's not easy.
First, it made me a little sick because it's something you have to get used to because it pulls on you, the harness and stuff they use. And so it's just going backwards flips, and forwards flips, and sideways, and just getting used to the kind of feeling of weightlessness. It's really interesting.
To further enhance the illusion of weightlessness, the camera is mounted on a device called a hothead, which allows a 360-degree rotation of the astronauts without forcing the camera operator to be turned upside down for numerous takes over a long shooting day. The operator manipulates the camera by remote control, and director Toby Hooper must speak to actor Steve Railsback by radio. Action. But the piano wires and the hothead aren't the only techniques used to create weightlessness on the screen. In a sequence involving the discovery of brittle, fossilized life aboard the alien spaceship, wires were no longer necessary. because the crew is photographed from behind one of the desiccated creatures. The illusion of weightlessness is maintained with the use of a set of camera dollies. The result of this technique is just as convincing as the more difficult wire work.
Looks prehistoric. It's completely desiccated. Crumbles. Yeah. It would. All the fluid's been lost to space over the years.
Throughout the history of motion pictures, athletic stars like Arnold Schwarzenegger have performed many of their own stunts. But during the making of Terminator, there was one illusion which even Arnold's massive strength couldn't create. So, mechanical effects veteran Roger George was called on to develop with director James Cameron a specially designed pneumatic arm and fist which is being used for the first time in a motion picture to create the illusion that Arnold is punching through a windshield. Everything must go right on the first try, so the stunt is rehearsed and timed over and over again. There's no margin for error. Timing is everything. One missed cue by Arnold or any of the crew would mean the scene would have to be shot again, and the windshield in the car would have to be replaced. A very costly and time-consuming process.
I've seen things where windshields have been broken, and I've done it with breakaway glass, and I've never been satisfied that it looks right. And we had to play several consecutive scenes after that with that windshield in view, because that car then goes out into a car chase, and it had to look like a real windshield had been broken. So I talked to some special effects people, the mechanical effects people in the film, and we determined that we had to use a real windshield. So the question was, how do we generate the force to get through a real windshield on camera? So we built a steel fist that weighed, I don't know what it weighed, 15, 20 pounds, something like that, and put it on a pneumatic ram that had 300 foot-pounds of pressure behind it, and set it up on a rig. Now, unfortunately, the rig was not mobile. It couldn't be moved at the speed that I wanted the car to be moving, because the car is in motion. So, but you can create the illusion that the car is moving by moving the background. So that's how we wound up putting 45 feet or 50 feet of brick wall on the side of a tractor trailer and moving it the opposite direction by the car with a fixed camera. The illusion works quite well. You really believe that you're moving with a moving car at the moment that it takes place. And then, of course, we put Arnold in front of the hydraulic ram, pneumatic ram, and we have the illusion that he punched through a windshield on a moving car.
Let's take a look at how the scene plays in The Terminator. The explosive Chuck Norris movie, Invasion USA, features perhaps the most stunts and effects per minute of any motion picture in recent years.
I've had an average crew of 24 stunt people per day. Yeah, we've been working. I think we got about 34 days of shooting in right now and 32 days of stunts. I'm loving every minute of it, too.
The explosions and machine guns have been so frequent on the set of Invasion that it's become downright disheartening for the crews that build the sets.
Every time we build an ice set, these guys come along and blow it up. I'm sick of it. I'm doing commercials from now on. That's our job!
One of the more exciting sequences created by director Joe Zito and stunt coordinator Aaron Norris takes place in an indoor mall in Atlanta. The The film crew had to do all their shooting at night so as not to disrupt the business day of dozens of stores. And you have to wonder how happy the store owners would have been if they had stayed awake to watch the explosions and machine gun fire that rocked the shopping mall all night for a week. The sequence begins with a security guard chasing a suspected shoplifter. But when the suspect comes dashing out of the store, it turns out that he has a gang of terrorists with machine guns waiting to rescue him. The terrorists wreak havoc with the hundreds of extras who work all night screaming and taking cover from 4 stuntmen spraying machine gun fire, which of course are blanks. For an explosion sequence, pyrotechnician Greg Lander and his crew have rigged air mortars and crammed cans full of debris in strategic places all over this quiet little gift shop.
We hit the air mortars at about 200 pounds, or at about 125 pounds, and the other one's about 80 pounds.
The air mortars blast the fire and debris toward the camera, creating a much more dramatic effect. Stuntman Brad Orison is placed right at the front of the gift shop as the fire begins to burn. He'll start running on cue. As the store explodes, the back of Brad's clothing is slightly singed. However, the explosion works perfectly. But the sequence is just beginning. While director of photography Raul Lamas brings his camera inside the store for a closer shot of a supposed victim of the blast, stuntman Al Jones makes use of the spare time rehearsing for a stunt in which his air ramp platform will be used to create the illusion that he is actually blown into the air by the explosion. As a test, Jones springs from the platform into an airbag to ensure the proper amount of pressure is set for the stunt. When the cameras roll, Jones will seemingly be thrown into the air by the explosion and come crashing down into a shelf of greeting cards. And there's more. Don Pike will drive a truck through the front of a mall, crashing through breakaway glass, swing dangerously close to the stunt people, and crash into yet another store. The marks for the stunt people and for Pike are carefully arranged by Aaron Norris. Still, the stunt is very dangerous. Pike must hit all of his marks and avoid the people, while explosions blast all around him. Could be a little distracting, don't you think? Here they go.
Background action. Background action.
It worked perfectly, and Aaron's the first one there to congratulate Pike on a job well done.
Did you see how close you came to the stunt people?
I saw nobody
Great.
on my mark.
You saw your mark. It was great.
I'd never even seen it.
They did a hell of a job. They were right next to you. The explosions were perfect. Truck went right in on the mark. Good.
Once again, let's take a look at how all of the elements of this explosive mall scene come together in the final version of Invasion USA. The art of stunts and special effects has become crucial to the magic of movie making. And so much of our movie-going pleasure is a direct result of the efforts of these unsung heroes who spend countless hours experimenting, trying new techniques, and risking their lives. I'm William Catt.